The law office was exactly what you'd expect for someone reading the will of a multimillionaire. Mahogany paneling, leather chairs, a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. I sat across from my brother Julian and his wife Vivian, both dressed like they were attending a coronation instead of a funeral. Our father had died 2 weeks earlier. Heart attack, the doctors said. Suddenly, unexpectedly, the lawyer, Mr. Henshaw, cleared his throat and began reading. To my son Julian, I leave the entirety of Patterson Industries, the family estate, all financial holdings, investment portfolios, and personal assets. Julian's smile was smug. Vivian squeezed his hand triumphantly. To my daughter Catherine, I leave the sum of $1,000, with the hope that she will use it to reflect on her choices and perhaps finally develop the maturity and capability she has so long lacked. The words hit me like a physical blow. $1,000. After 32 years of being his daughter, the justification was worse than the amount. A public dismissal of my worth, read aloud in front of Julian's satisfied face and Vivian's barely concealed smirk. I sat there, numb, while Mr. Henshaw continued with formalities. When it ended, Julian stood and extended his hand. No hard feelings, Katie. Dad knew who could handle the responsibility. I didn't shake his hand. I just walked out. Julian changed the locks on our childhood home within 48 hours. I discovered this when I tried to retrieve some of my mother's belongings that Dad had kept in storage. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, met me at the door with apologetic eyes. I'm sorry, Miss Catherine. Mr. Julian's orders. No access without his permission. I stood on the porch of the house where I'd grown up, locked out like a stranger. That night, going through my apartment, I found something I'd almost forgotten. A small package that had arrived by courier a month before Dad died. Inside was an antique brass key and a handwritten note in my father's script. For my true heir. Keep this safe. You'll know when you need it. At the time, I'd thought it was just a sentimental gift. Maybe a key to an old jewelry box or a childhood memento. But now, staring at it, the words true heir felt loaded with meaning. I held the key up to the light. There was an engraving on it. A number. 4782. The number was a safety deposit box. It took me 3 banks to find the right one, but when I finally slid that key into box 4782 at Caldwell National Bank, my hands were shaking. Inside wasn't what I expected. No revised will. No legal documents granting me inheritance. Instead, I found my father's private journal, a leather-bound book I'd never seen before. And beneath it, a single page. A legal document titled Codicil to the Last Will and Testament of Harold Patterson. I read it twice. It split the estate evenly between Julian and me. 50-50. Everything. But there was a problem. The codicil was unsigned. At the bottom, where my father's signature should have been, there was only a blank line. And a note, paper-clipped to the document. The truth must be proven first. Follow the trail, Catherine. The truth is buried with your mother. My mother had died 5 years ago. What truth was he talking about? I opened the journal to the last entry. The date was the day before my father died. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. I have discovered a betrayal so deep it threatens everything I've built. Julian and Vivian have been stealing from the company for years. I confronted Julian today about Ethelred Holdings. He denied everything, but I have proof. Tomorrow, I'm taking it to the authorities. If anything happens to me, if I don't survive to set this right, Catherine, follow the trail I've left. You were always the clever one. The one who saw patterns where others saw chaos. Start with your mother. The truth is buried with her. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. My father's death wasn't a heart attack. Or if it was, something had triggered it. And he'd expected it. He'd prepared for it. I thought about his funeral. How Julian had insisted on a closed casket. How he'd rushed the cremation. How he'd handled all the arrangements without letting me see Dad one last time. I looked back at the journal. The pages were filled with entries, but they weren't in English. They were in the cipher. When I was 10 years old, my father taught me a substitution cipher as a game. We'd write each other secret messages, swapping letters according to a pattern only we understood. It started simple. A became Z, B became Y, but we made it more complex over time, adding numerical shifts and keyword codes. We hadn't used it in 20 years. But I remembered. I spent that entire night decrypting the journal, my childhood skills coming back like muscle memory. The keyword was Catherine, my name used as the cipher key. Classic Dad. Each letter in my name corresponded to a number shift. C meant shift 3 letters forward. A meant shift 1 letter back. It was tedious work, but by morning, I had the first 10 pages decoded. And what I read made my blood run cold. My father had been investigating Julian for 6 months. The entries detailed everything. Falsified expense reports. Diverted client payments. Shell companies. Julian was bleeding Patterson Industries dry. The decrypted pages revealed that Dad had hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb. Webb had traced the money to a shell corporation called Ethelred Holdings. Ethelred was registered in the Cayman Islands. It had no employees, no office, no legitimate business operations. It existed solely to receive and launder money stolen from Patterson Industries. The amounts were staggering. Over the past 3 years, Julian and Vivian had embezzled more than $8 million. They'd done it cleverly, spreading the theft across dozens of small transactions. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Nothing big enough to trigger an audit. But it added up. My father's journal entries showed how he'd pieced it together. Bank statements Webb had obtained. Corporate filings with Julian's signature. Email correspondence between Julian and Vivian discussing the transfers. The evidence was methodical and damning. But there was something else. An entry about how Julian had covered his tracks early on by framing someone else. The journal revealed that 5 years ago, when the embezzlement first started, there had been a small discrepancy in the accounts. Only $50,000, but enough to raise questions. Julian had blamed it on a longtime employee named Walter Pemberton. Mr. Pemberton had been the company's chief financial officer for 20 years. Loyal, hardworking, trusted by everyone. Julian fabricated evidence against him. Doctored emails. Forged signatures. Then he took the evidence to my father and demanded Pemberton's firing. Dad, trusting his son, had fired Pemberton immediately. No investigation. No chance to defend himself. Pemberton's reputation was destroyed. He couldn't get another job in finance. Last my father knew, he was working as a night clerk at a grocery store. The journal entry showed my father's guilt. I wronged Walter Pemberton. I believed my son's lies and destroyed an innocent man's life. Catherine, if you're reading this, find Walter. Tell him I'm sorry. He deserves to know the truth. I looked up Pemberton's address. It was time to make an unlikely alliance. Walter Pemberton lived in a rundown apartment complex on the edge of town. When he opened the door, I barely recognized him. He'd aged 20 years and 5. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. What do you want? His voice was bitter. I'm Catherine Patterson. I need to talk to you about what happened. I know who you are. Your brother ruined my life. Now get out. My brother lied. He framed you. And I can prove it. That stopped him. Slowly he opened the door wider. Inside, his apartment was sparse but clean. A man hanging on by his fingernails to dignity. I showed him the journal. The decoded entries about Julian's embezzlement. The part where my father wrote about being deceived about Walter. He read it all, his hands shaking. When he finished, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. Why are you showing me this? Because Julian stole from you too. Your reputation, your career, your life. He needs to pay for it. And I can't take him down alone. Walter Pemberton wiped his eyes. Then his expression hardened into something fierce. What do you need? The next decoded section of my father's journal was about my mother. Specifically about the day she died. My mother Ellen had fallen down the stairs in our home 5 years ago. She'd broken her neck. The death was ruled an accident. She'd been home alone, or so we thought. But my father's journal told a different story. Ellen suspected Julian was stealing. She confronted him the morning she died. I was at the office. She called me, said she'd found evidence, bank statements Julian had hidden in his old room. She was going to bring them to me. An hour later she was dead. The police said she fell. But Ellen was careful. She'd walked those stairs 10,000 times. I've always wondered, but I could never prove anything. And I couldn't bear to accuse my own son of. I can't even write it. But Catherine, if I'm right, if Julian is capable of that, you must be careful. He's dangerous. I sat back, the journal trembling in my hands. My father thought Julian might have killed our mother. Pushed her down the stairs to protect his secret. I thought about Julian at the funeral. He'd cried. He'd given a moving eulogy. Had it all been an act? Walter Pemberton had kept his old credentials to the Patterson Industries computer system. They should have been deactivated when he was fired, but in the chaos IT had missed them. It's a security nightmare, Walter said, logging in through a back door. But right now it's our advantage. We planted a data scraping program that Walter had designed. It was sophisticated, invisible to standard security scans. It gave us real-time access to every financial transaction Julian made through the company servers. Within 48 hours we were watching the money move. Julian was accelerating. Large transfers were happening almost daily now. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing out of Patterson Industries into Ethelred Holdings. He's liquidating, Walter said, watching the data stream. He's not planning to run the company long-term. He's cashing out. How much has he taken? Walter did the math. Including what he stole before? I'd estimate 14 million. Maybe more. $14 million. And it was moving fast. We had to stop him before it all disappeared offshore. We traced Ethelred Holdings to a bank in the Cayman Islands. The account was registered under a fake name, but the signatures on the account documents were Julian's. We had copies of everything now. Bank transfers, corporate documents, email correspondence where Julian and Vivian discussed their exit strategy. But we needed more than digital evidence. We needed something that would hold up in court. Something undeniable. The money trail led to a specific bank, Crestview International. It was known for serving wealthy clients who valued discretion above all else. Getting account information would be nearly impossible without a warrant. Unless we could get inside legally. That's when I had an idea. A risky, possibly insane idea. What if I became an investor? I said. What if I approached Julian as someone interested in buying into the company? I could get close to him, access his records from the inside. Walter looked at me like I was crazy. You think he won't recognize his own sister? Not if I'm someone completely different. Creating a false identity was easier than I expected. Walter had contacts in places I didn't want to know about. Within a week, I had a Swiss passport in the name of Katerina Volkov, complete with a backstory, a fake investment company, and a very real-looking portfolio of international holdings. The passport photo showed me with platinum blonde hair, blue contact lenses, and makeup that completely changed my face structure. I looked like a Scandinavian ice queen. Nothing like Catherine Patterson. I practiced the accent for days. Swiss-German inflection with hints of Russian. Katerina was educated, sophisticated, and very, very rich. She was everything Julian wanted to impress. Walter helped me research Julian's business interests. I memorized company reports, market trends, competitor analysis. When I finally made contact, I had to be perfect. I sent an email through my fake company's account. Mr. Patterson, I've been reviewing Patterson Industries with interest. I believe we have an opportunity for mutually beneficial partnership. I'll be in town next week. Perhaps we could discuss investment possibilities over dinner. Julian responded within an hour. The bait was taken. Julian chose the restaurant. Expensive, exclusive, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance. He'd pulled strings to get us a table, trying to impress. I arrived as Katerina, dressed in a designer suit that had cost more than my rent. Julian didn't recognize me. Not even a flicker. He stood when I approached, his smile practiced and charming. Ms. Volkov. A pleasure. Mr. Patterson. Your company has an impressive reputation. We talked business over wine that cost more per glass than I used to make in a day. I played my part perfectly. Interested but skeptical. Rich enough to be tempting. Julian worked hard to sell me on Patterson Industries. the growth potential, the market position, the innovative leadership, meaning himself. I let him talk, gathering information with every sentence. His arrogance made him careless. He mentioned Ethelred Holdings once, calling it a subsidiary for international operations. I filed that away. By dessert, he was hooked. I think we could structure a very attractive investment package, he said. Shall we schedule a formal meeting? I could show you the full portfolio. While I was playing Katerina, another opportunity emerged. A junior accountant at Patterson Industries reached out to me through LinkedIn. His name was Timothy, and we'd known each other years ago when I still worked at the company. His message was cryptic. Catherine, I heard about your father. I'm sorry. I think you should know, things at the company aren't right. Julian is moving assets fast. The books don't add up. If you want to know more, call me. I called from a burner phone. Timothy met me at a park near his apartment. He looked nervous. I could lose my job for talking to you. Tell me what you know. Julian's been ordering rushed audits of company assets. He's getting valuations on everything, real estate, equipment, intellectual property. Like he's preparing for a fire sale. How fast? He wants everything appraised within the month. And he's been meeting with investment bankers. Not the ones we usually work with. These are the kind of people who specialize in discreet liquidation. Julian was planning to sell Patterson Industries, piece by piece, take the money and run before anyone realized what he'd stolen. We were running out of time. The next meeting with Julian was at Patterson Industries headquarters. As Katerina, I toured the offices where I'd once worked. Julian showed me financial reports, all carefully doctored to hide the embezzlement. At dinner afterward, I made my move. You're an impressive man, Julian, I said, my accent perfectly crisp. Your father built something remarkable, but you've elevated it. His ego preened. I've had a vision for the company my father never understood. I can see that. You're not bound by old thinking. I leaned closer. That's rare. Most men in your position are afraid to take risks. Not me. I know what I want. The implication was clear. He thought I was flirting. It made my skin crawl, but I maintained Katerina's cool smile. Perhaps we should discuss investment terms somewhere more private. My home? Tomorrow evening? My wife is traveling. Vivian was out of town. Perfect. Julian was making this too easy. And every moment of this conversation was being recorded by the device hidden in my watch. Back at my apartment, I decoded more of my father's journal. The entries near the end were increasingly desperate. But there was one section that didn't fit the pattern. Instead of information about the embezzlement, it was a puzzle. Catherine, if you've made it this far, you're close to the end. The unsigned codicil can be validated. I've left you a key, but not the kind you expect. It's not about a signature. It's about proof of identity. My biometric data is stored in a secure device, hidden where my heart truly lies. Find it, and you can authenticate the codicil legally. The courts will accept it. You'll get what you deserve. Biometric data. Fingerprints, probably. Or possibly retinal scans. But where would he hide it? Where my heart truly lies. I thought about that phrase. My father was sentimental in private, even if he was stern in public. Where would his heart be? Not the office. Not the company. Then I remembered. The last birthday present he'd given me, 3 months before he died. A music box. The music box sat on my dresser. Antique mahogany with delicate inlay work. It played a melody from my childhood. Claire de Lune. My mother's favorite. I'd treasured it but never examined it closely. Now I looked at it with new eyes. The box was heavier than it should be. I turned it over, studying the base. There was a seam almost invisible. I pressed the corners in a specific pattern. Another code Dad had taught me as a child, and the false bottom clicked open. Inside was a small digital device, no bigger than a USB drive. It had a biometric scanner on one end and a tiny screen on the other. When I touched the scanner, the screen lit up. Patterson Herald. Fingerprint authenticated. File access granted. My father had recorded his fingerprints. This device could be used to validate documents, to prove his identity on legal papers, including the codicil. I had the power to claim my inheritance. But I realized something. If I just showed up with the codicil and this device, Julian would fight it in court. He'd delay, tie it up in legal battles for years. I needed more. I needed to expose everything he'd done. Not just for me. For Walter. For my mother. For everyone Julian had destroyed. Walter and I compiled everything we had. Financial records showing the embezzlement. The data we'd scraped from the company servers. My father's journal entries, decoded and documented. We built a comprehensive dossier that proved Julian's crimes. But we needed the final pieces. We needed Julian to commit fresh fraud. Something we could witness and document. That's when I designed the trap. As Katerina, I would offer Julian an investment deal so good he couldn't resist. $10 million in exchange for a controlling stake in Patterson Industries. The catch? The investment terms would require him to commit blatant fraud. He'd have to falsify company valuation, hide the embezzlement, and forge documents. All witnessed. All recorded. Walter helped me draft the proposal. It was technically legal but required Julian to lie about the company's financial health to close the deal. If he did it, we'd have him on multiple counts of fraud. We scheduled the meeting for Friday evening. At Julian's home. Where we could control the environment. And where I could finally get the answers I needed about my mother. I needed one more piece of evidence. Vivian. She'd been quiet through all of this, but I knew she was involved. Women didn't marry Julian for his personality. She'd been in it for the money from the start. I engineered a meeting. As myself this time, not Katerina. I called Vivian and suggested we clear the air about the will. She agreed to meet at an expensive spa. All the while I was wearing a wire. Walter was listening from a van in the parking lot. I want you to know I don't blame you, I said as we sat in the meditation room. Julian gets what Julian wants. He always has. Vivian's guard dropped slightly. Your father never appreciated him. Always comparing him to you. Really? I thought Dad preferred Julian. Are you kidding? He talked about you constantly. Your degrees, your accomplishments. Julian was so jealous. Is that why Dad was going to change the will? Vivian went very still. What are you talking about? I leaned closer. We both know Dad was planning to give me half the estate. Julian must have been furious. That's ridiculous. Is it? You and Julian knew Dad was meeting with lawyers. You knew he discovered the money you were stealing. You had to act fast. Vivian's face went pale. I don't know what you're... What did Julian do, Vivian? What did he do to make sure Dad didn't change that will? She stood up. This conversation is over. But it was too late. She'd hesitated. Her expression had confirmed everything. Walter had it all on tape. The final piece came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chun, our old housekeeper, called me. Miss Catherine, I need to tell you something. About the day your father died. We met at her apartment. She was nervous, wringing her hands. I should have said something sooner. But Mr. Julian, he paid me. Told me to keep quiet. About what? The security system. Your father had cameras installed throughout the house 6 months before he died. He didn't tell anyone except me. I had the access codes because I cleaned his office. My heart was racing. Where are the recordings? Mr. Julian deleted most of them. But I made a backup. Your father asked me to. He said if anything happened I should keep the files safe. She handed me a hard drive. The argument is on here. Mr. Julian and your father. The day before your father died. I went home and plugged in the drive with shaking hands. The video was timestamped. 7:15 p.m. The night before Dad's death. It showed my father's office. Dad behind his desk. Julian standing in front of it. The audio was clear. You've been stealing from me, Dad said. From your own family. I built this company as much as you did. You nearly destroyed it. And now I find out about your mother. Don't. Julian's voice was sharp. Ellen's death was an accident. Was it? She called me the morning she died. Said she'd found your bank statements. Then she fell. Funny timing, don't you think? Julian's face went cold. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it. I'm cutting you out. I'm leaving everything to Catherine. She's the one with integrity. Julian leaned over the desk. If you do that, you'll regret it. The video ended there. 36 hours later, my father was dead. The company's centennial gala was in 3 days. Julian had planned it as his coronation, his official introduction as CEO, a celebration of his leadership. It was perfect. A room full of company shareholders, board members, and industry press, all watching as Julian claimed his throne. That's where I'd destroy him. Walter and I prepared the presentation. Every piece of evidence, organized chronologically. Financial documents, bank statements, email correspondence, the video of Julian's threat, and finally the biometric validation of the codicil. We rehearsed it a dozen times. I had to be perfect, calm, professional, devastating. The night before the gala, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my father, about my mother, about all the lies that had held our family together. Tomorrow I was going to burn it all down. The gala was held at the Grand Regency Hotel, a ballroom full of crystal chandeliers and people in expensive clothes. I arrived early and checked in as Katerina Volkov. Julian had personally invited her as his potential investor. I wore a dark green gown and the blonde wig. Julian greeted me warmly, never suspecting. Ms. Volkov, so glad you could make it. We'll have much to celebrate tonight. I'm certain we will. The room filled. I saw Vivian across the ballroom dripping in diamonds. Board members, shareholders, journalists. Walter was there too, disguised as catering staff managing the technical side. At 8 p.m. Julian took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us to celebrate 100 years of Patterson Industries. He spoke about legacy, about vision, about leading the company into the future. People applauded. He was charming, confident, at the height of his triumph. Then I made my move. I walked toward the stage, removing my wig as I went. The blonde hair came off. The blue contacts came out. Katerina Volkov disappeared. Catherine Patterson emerged. Julian saw me halfway through. His face went from confusion to shock to fear in 3 seconds. What? I walked up the steps to the stage. The tech crew, briefed by Walter, switched the presentation screen from Julian's speech to my prepared slideshow. The title appeared in 6-foot letters, The Truth About the Patterson Legacy. I stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. Every eye was on me. Good evening. For those who don't know me, I'm Catherine Patterson, Harold Patterson's daughter. Some of you may wonder why I'm interrupting this celebration. The answer is simple. You deserve to know who you're really celebrating tonight. I clicked to the first slide. A photograph of Julian and Vivian. My brother Julian and his wife Vivian have been embezzling from Patterson Industries for over 5 years. The total amount stolen is approximately $14 million. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Julian was frozen on stage. That's a lie. Vivian shouted from the back. Is it? I clicked to the next slide. Bank statements. This is Ethelred Holdings, a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. Watch the money flow. The next slide showed the paper trail. Money leaving Patterson accounts, arriving at Ethelred, then transferred to personal accounts owned by Julian and Vivian. Names, dates, amounts. Everything documented. They hid it by spreading the theft across thousands of small transactions. But it adds up. Here's the total. The final number appeared. $14,247,832. The room erupted. There's more, I said, and the room quieted. I played the video. My father and Julian arguing. Julian's threat. The room watched in stunned silence. When it ended, I looked at Julian. The day after this conversation, our father died of a heart attack. Convenient timing. You can't prove anything. Julian finally found his voice. Can't I? Let's talk about Mom. I showed the journal entry. My father's suspicions about my mother's death. Ellen Patterson fell down the stairs 5 years ago. The morning she died, she'd confronted Julian about finding his bank statements. She was bringing evidence of his theft to my father. She never made it. Vivian went pale. Hours later, she was dead. The police called it an accident. But I've recently obtained testimony from Mrs. Chun, our housekeeper, who heard Julian and my mother arguing at the top of the stairs shortly before her fall. Julian looked like he might be sick. I never touched her. Maybe not. But you were there. And you didn't help her. Did you? That's all very dramatic, Julian said, trying to regain control. But none of it matters. Dad's will was clear. He left me everything. The company is mine. About that. I pulled out the codicil. Before he died, our father drafted an amendment to his will. This codicil splits the estate equally between us. I held it up for everyone to see. The problem is it's unsigned. Or is it? I called out. Mr. Henshaw, could you join me please? The lawyer who'd read the original will stood from his seat in the audience and walked to the stage. He looked confused but professional. Mr. Henshaw, you're familiar with biometric validation for legal documents? Yes. In cases where a signature is impossible but identity verification is needed, biometric data can substitute. I held up the device from the music box. This contains our father's fingerprint data, recorded 3 months before his death and stored in a secure device. Can you verify its authenticity? Mr. Henshaw examined the device carefully. He pulled out a laptop, connected it, and ran the verification software. The room waited in silence. Finally, he looked up. The fingerprint data is authentic. It matches Harold Patterson's official records. Any document validated with this device would be legally binding. I pressed the device to the signature line on the codicil. The device beeped. On the screen a message appeared. Document authenticated. Harold Patterson verified. I handed the codicil to Mr. Henshaw. This makes the estate division 50-50. The company, the house, the assets. All of it. Julian's face crumbled. No. No, that's not possible. It's already done. Security, which Walter and I had briefed beforehand, moved toward the stage. Julian Patterson, Vivian Patterson, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. The security guards were actually off-duty police officers I'd hired. They had the real police waiting outside. Julian screamed. This is a setup. She's lying. All of it is lies. The evidence is digital, time-stamped, and verified by independent forensic accountants, I said calmly. You can scream all you want. It won't change what you did. Vivian tried to run. She made it 3 steps before security caught her. She was sobbing. It was Julian. He made me do it. I didn't know about the mother, I swear. Julian turned on her. Shut up. Shut your mouth. But it was too late. The board members were standing, talking urgently. The journalists were recording everything. The shareholders looked horrified. As Julian and Vivian were led away in handcuffs, he looked back at me. I'm your brother. How could you do this to me? I met his eyes. You killed our mother. You stole our father's company. You tried to erase me. And you ask how I could do this to you. I shook my head. I just exposed the truth. You did this to yourself. The fallout was absolute. Julian and Vivian were charged with multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Julian faced additional investigation for my mother's death, though proving murder after 5 years was difficult. The evidence from the security footage was enough to reopen the case. Vivian's family, wealthy and image-conscious, publicly disowned her. Her parents released a statement calling her actions unforgivable. Within a week, their assets were frozen. Their mansion was seized. Their cars, their jewelry, their designer clothes, all taken as part of the criminal investigation. The board of Patterson Industries voted unanimously to install me as interim CEO while they determined the company's future. I didn't particularly want to run the company, but I owed it to my father to stabilize things first. I visited them in jail. Not for closure. Not for forgiveness. Just to look them in the eye one more time. Julian was in an orange jumpsuit. He'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. What do you want? He asked. To tell you something Dad used to say. The capable one handles it. You always thought that meant you. But he was talking about me. He knew I could handle this. All of it. Julian said nothing. I walked away and never looked back. 6 months later, Patterson Industries was sold to a competitor for a fair price. I could have kept it, built it back up, made it mine. But that wasn't what I wanted. I restored the family estate and opened it to the public as a museum dedicated to my father's legitimate legacy. The proceeds funded something more important: the Patterson Foundation for Corporate Ethics. It provided legal assistance to whistleblowers and victims of corporate fraud. Walter Pemberton was the foundation's first director. His reputation restored, he threw himself into the work with fierce dedication. Your father would be proud, he told me at the foundation's opening. I hope so. I'd kept my father's journal, the music box, and the photographs of our family in happier times. Everything else, the money, the house, the company, was just stuff. What mattered was the truth and justice. A year later, I was invited to speak at a corporate ethics conference. The organizer asked me to share my story. I stood in front of 300 business leaders and told them everything. How my brother had embezzled millions. How he'd possibly killed our mother and definitely contributed to our father's death. How I'd gathered evidence, built a case, and exposed him at his moment of triumph. After the speech, a young woman approached me. She was probably 25, wearing an inexpensive suit, her eyes red from crying. Thank you, she said. I work for a company where my boss is stealing. I've known for months, but I was too scared to say anything. Your story gave me the courage to go to the police. I gave her the foundation's card. Call us. We'll help you. She wasn't the only one. Over the next year, the foundation received hundreds of calls. People who'd been victimized by corporate fraud. People who needed help fighting back. We helped them all. Turned out there were a lot of Julians in the world. And now there were people ready to stop them. I sat on my balcony 2 years after the gala, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the city. The apartment I'd bought was modest but comfortable. The money from the company sale had been invested wisely. I had enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But more importantly, I had peace. My father's music box sat on the table beside me. I wound it up and let it play. Claire de Lune drifted through the morning air. Mom's favorite. Dad's gift. A reminder of what I'd fought for. Not revenge. Justice. There's a difference. Revenge is about making someone suffer. Justice is about restoring balance. I'd restored that balance. Julian and Vivian were in prison. The stolen money was recovered. The victims were compensated. The company was in honest hands. And I was free. Free from the weight of my family's expectations. Free from the shadow of my brother's ambition. Free to build something meaningful with my life. I thought about my father's final words to me. The ones he'd left in the journal. For my true heir. Not the one who inherited by default. The one who earned it. I'd earned it. Not through blood or birth.